Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. We know there's a lot of competition for your time today, but we have a problem. Citizens are bracing for multiple tax increases. It would really be easy for us to go in and vote for them and then go home and enjoy the rest of June with our families. But we feel it is our job to agree with the taxpayers. We need to make sure that we don't hurt our middle class, because you see our upper class is going to Florida to live, and that is a problem. Money for state spending on projects has not been evaluated for cost effectiveness in years. We also pay routinely for programs that are outside of the core responsibility of state government. Yes, we could kick the can down the road, and sadly that phrase has become almost like the state motto. But we prefer to represent taxpayers and say, hold on. There is much reform that needs to be done in our state government. In fact, it is urgent. We are 6th in the nation in combined state and local spending. This year's deficit does need to be paid off, but we are looking for bold and structural reform to our public. We've been talking about them, but now we want to make sure that everyone is clear that this is going to take a lot of work. It needs to start this year. And we have the 3 gentlemen here to explain those positions.
For 40 years, we've used the 98% rule to govern our spending. In good times, spending accelerated beyond our ability to sustain it. Give politicians money, they'll spend it. So in bad years, we were faced with budget crisis and tax increases, much like we're talking today. This is unsustainable and it needs to change. We're proposing a new fiscal framework by which we use a combination of economic growth, income growth, population growth, and inflation to govern our spending growth. In addition, we are calling for the creation of a budget stabilization fund that would accumulate money in good years while supporting our growth in the lean years. This would provide certainty, stability, and predictable growth, and prevent us from the cycle of constant crisis. And I might add that we welcome a collaboration of these 2 issues with our Democrat colleagues.
Thank you, and appreciate you being here today. The proposals we have today are to be made on 3 points. We're providing transparency. We want you to know what our ideas and our thoughts are. It's about government reform, and it's about an issue of actually making structural changes to the way we actually do business. We have out there 2 proposals. One is on prevailing wage revision, and prevailing wage is a topic that's been talked about for many years in this state. But it will allow, in these 2 bills, allow school districts, and in a separate bill, towns and cities and counties to actually exempt themselves from prevailing wage over a 2-year period and study those prevailing wage numbers to actually see what they actually are and how they impact the spending of those entities. The other issue is that we think the system is actually flawed. You can see by the proposal that we had given out to you previously on the Sussex County Paramedic Station, the actual increased cost was about 24%. To understand this really logically, what happened, the county bid at $1 million, they accepted state money, they reduced their cost, but the overall project increased by 24%. It also allows school districts and municipalities to bid as they would in the private sector and get the best deal they can for construction, while providing good, workable wages for those that actually do the job, competitive wages. This proposal not only maximizes the efficiency of the local tax dollars, but it gives increasing employment. I mean, we could actually, in the county proposal, put 24% more people to work or do 24% more of another project. In addition, this does give some necessary relief for school districts. As you can see, they're being faced with an opportunity that they really don't like, that is increasing taxes without referendum. Some folks have actually said this has nothing to do about the budget. I actually think this is very deceitful to say that. This has everything to do about the budget. While it doesn't directly impact the budget, if you're spending 24% more on capital projects, it means you have to find that money somewhere. and that means that it's higher cost in that area, when in fact you might be able to apply that to the budget itself. And contrary to what some folks have actually said about prevailing wage, this actually hurts small business. This is to the contrary as well. Small businesses competing in the small business world, they're actually not being able to bid on these projects because they hire bigger union-led companies at the economy of scale that the small businesses do not. So we think that this is a structural change that needs to happen, is one we've talked about for many, many years, and needs to be reviewed as by the two bills we've introduced. The other issue we've talked about as well, school district consolidation, getting consolidation and construction messed up. A lot of folks have mentioned to us this year through the budget reset process the governor has had that we should be exploring school consolidation. With that being said, we think it's time for actually to institute a study to legitimately say what is it we can and what is it we can't do. Not just have rhetoric around the fact that we can't do that because it's going to cost us more money, but actually put together a task force that would come together, review this opportunity, and come back to us, the legislature, with a recommendation of whether it actually makes sense or not. Let's finally answer that question. Let's do it now, and let's provide some real relief for the citizens of this state. I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Greg Lavelle.
Thanks, Ben. Good afternoon, everyone. Medicaid's a huge budget item for the state of Delaware. We spend $800 million a year on Medicaid, and it continues to grow. Something has to be done to fix that. Numerous other states have applied for Medicare waivers, the federal government, to try to implement local programs and ideas to not make costs go down, which would be great, but not likely, but to reduce the growth of Medicaid. Delaware has to do that. We have to tackle this monster. If we could save just 5% on Medicaid, that would be $40 million a year that could be used elsewhere, perhaps even because we never see the end of proposals to expand Medicaid in this building, and we continue to get them every year. So that is something that could be done with that money, or there's plenty of other places to do that as well. So this has to be done. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be done in 3 weeks. But we need to commit to doing it now, and just not do one of these other study groups. And all these ideas aren't just to get through June and say, hey, we did something. It is to have meaningful reform in state government. And we will hold feet to the fire as we expect our voters to hold our feet to the fire on this as well. So that is another thing that we're doing. And an great example on that, it's irony if nothing else, is that Delaware currently has a Government Accountability Act. Anybody knew that? It has about 20 years. And we ask state government to report on themselves on how well they're doing around their programs and delivery of services. And it's my understanding that it's either not done or you're sort of reporting on yourself. So we're doing a great job again this year. To the point actually that some people have proposed eliminating it because they recognize it's not done. That's the wrong way to go. We have to improve this if it needs to be improved, but certainly pay attention to the law. So this is something that JSC has to do, and we have to do with them, because accountability matters. Again, we always seem to ask for more money, and we're ignoring some of the things that we have to do. So as Debbie said, kicking the can down the road, it sounds like it's the new state motto, and I think that's important because I know Representative Schwarzkopf talks about that and the governor talks about that, and if we don't make fundamental and systemic changes, and the current proposal from the other side doesn't have any systemic change, it gets through the 2018 election, which is a great goal, but then we're going to be right back here in January 2019 in the same situation. So we need to do this fiscal framework that we talked about. We need to do prevailing wage reform that we've talked about. We need to do Medicaid reform that we've talked about. We need to do all of these things because spending more money and increasing taxes is the same old can that gets kicked down the road. It's not new and it's not systemic. So there are hard choices to be made, and we're willing, colleagues in the back, to work with the Democrats to make those hard choices and improve Delaware state government with really the ultimate goal is improving our economy and overall performance, because that would be a wonderful way to bring in new state revenue through economic growth. So any questions or
for
comments?
What would be your #1 priority on all these?
The number one priority is to improve the performance of state government, so all of these are equally important to us.
How much of this is part of the budget negotiations, I mean, do you guys want all of this in exchange for the budget, some of this, how does that work?
Well, this is not new news to our friends that we've had in the flag meetings. They're aware of all these initiatives. We'll continue to talk with them, so we'll see how it goes.
And that's in contrast to what we're getting in the flag meetings. We don't know what the Democrats' real proposal is for personal income tax. Is it just to increase the brackets we have now, or is it to add one more, or is it to add two more? We don't know that.
A lot of this is conceptual. You want to form some task forces and study things. Greg, you mentioned Medicaid reform's not going to be done in the next 3 weeks. What are you guys willing to do in the next 3 weeks to get a budget?
We'll continue talking with them. We've floated some ideas.
Can you provide some of those ideas?
Well, we've these 4 ideas that we've talked about, and we've reached. I think
There's no numbers to this.
Well,
You need numbers.
just a minute, Randall. So in terms of the problem that is proposed by the governor, we supported the corporate franchise tax. So it's not like we're sitting on our hands doing nothing, but we need a little love coming the other direction because they've not embraced any of these ideas to date.
Why is there no mention of state employee health care in here, since that is also a systemic problem going into the out years?
Well, I think being the person that deals in that health insurance industry, that has been laid out pretty well right now for the short term in this budget. And I think that's something for the future. I think we've laid out what we think are structural changes, and that are actual impacts that are not truly structural, but actually from year to year.
The double state chair, some of these were
Yeah.
mentioned.
And to the governor's credit, he's proposed some of these things, so we're not suggesting we're the only ones with ideas in the building, but to bring those ideas together jointly is the goal.
And we're not necessarily discounting those issues that were brought forward by the governor.
Representative Hudson, you mentioned there are programs outside their core responsibility of state government. What are some of those things?
Well, is the state of Delaware required to pay for kindergarten and secondary education, or do we just do K through 12? That's just one example.
I guess my question is, what programs, people talk about cutting programs in state government. What programs do any of you guys who are up there think we can't afford our core services of government that should be maybe looked at cutting?
Well, you know, joint finance is going through that exercise, and it's quite an exercise because we're really not sure if they're in, if they're out. The goal is 200 million, if it's 80. Still trying to figure out what a soft cut is. Is there such thing as a soft tax increase? Maybe we can marry the soft and come to a solution. But as the governor said in his State of the State speech, or you know, paraphrasing me, and I paraphrase a lot of other people on this, when you're in a hole, stop digging. So rather let joint finance do that hard work, and we're not suggesting it's easy, but can we stop proposing new programs and new spending when we can't even get our arms around what we're supposed to be doing now? Free college sounds great. First of all, it's not free, it's expensive. You know, helping other folks with healthcare issues around Medicaid is a nice thought, but we can't afford the Medicaid that we have now. So all great ideas, altruistic and all that sort of stuff, but they're not practical.
And we are meeting this evening, I think you probably know that, but there's a part of us that think that we really should wait a little bit longer to see what the DFAC presents.
Next Monday, right?
Yeah, it's close enough that that should be a vital part of our discussion and our planning.
And keep in mind, one of the key terms has been shared sacrifice, yet we find that there's a real lack of interest in talking about shared sacrifice when it comes to something like prevailing wage, which is truly an issue that has some great economic aspects to it. The other one is the schools consolidation. No, we can't do that. We looked at that before. It doesn't work. So those are the two that I talked about today. And in fact, they do have a shared sacrifice issue that is a component of it.
Have you broached all of these ideas to Democrats?
Have we talked about them?
Yeah. Have you guys brought these up in the?
Yeah, this is no secret to the other side of the aisle. These are things that we've been talking about, not just this year, but not just this year, but for years.
Reruns.
Ruth Briggs King is in the back. She's championed the prevailing wage issue for as long as she's been here.
And Medicaid gets more expensive every year. Well, we got to get upstairs.
Yeah, and,
we have votes to cast.
If you have other
always
questions
around.
later, you know we'll be working here all day and then into the evening. So thank you for your interest in this very important issue.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys.